All right, guys, we are back with another Seeing Through Gebser. We are on page 418 in this edition of the book, and we're working our way through, guys. We have about, I'd say, just over 100 pages left, maybe 120 pages left, and we're working through it. We're on a new section now. So last section we did was the sciences of the mind. So we did philosophy, we did psychology, and then, of course, before that we did biology and physics. So now we're moving on to the social sciences, and today we are going to be beginning and ending the section on jurisprudence. I know you guys love it, hearing me go off about modern modern issues, so get excited. I'm going to try to refrain myself, but I guess what I'm trying to say is, to a certain extent, we will be talking about kind of contemporary politics, but I'm going to try really hard not to be super partisan about this. So let's get right into it. Is it possible that jurisprudence, if you don't know, more or less, I hate to frame it in such a way, but I do think it's kind of like a new left-wing phenomena where you just try your best to have social justice outcomes implemented through the law. That really seems to be, every time I've ever heard someone describe it, it always ends up in that direction. Oh, it's just about like justice and fairness in the law, and you're like, okay, but who decides what's just? Oh, well, we want equity and we want this, and I'm like, oh, okay. So let's get into it. To quote Gebser, law and the administration of justice are sociological formations and presuppose the mental structure. Okay, so there we go. We already got this. So Gebser is saying that justice is a part of the mental structure. We've already kind of talked about this, actually. The judge is always the director, and the law, the right, clearly emphasizes the quote-unquote right side, the patriarchal, manly light. The very meaning of the word law, gesetz, equals setting or positioning, assumes space and hence is spatially determined and bound. The structural interconnections of right, law, and patriarchy to the right, the wakeful consciousness and its directed right thinking, have been presented in detail in the first part above. So we talked about in the very beginning of this, I think it was in the Perspectival World, is one of the first 4 or 5 videos I did in this series. The right is the side of the mental structure, waking diurnal consciousness, boundary setting, order setting. The spatialization presupposed in what I just said should be obvious at this point in the series. And then, of course, you have the director, right? The judge is the director, and, of course, direction belongs to what? That's the mental structure. It doesn't have to be a perfect one-to-one, but generally, I think it holds up. What was I about to say? Okay, so we'll just continue. To make clear the extent to which each verdict is a mental act requiring mental foundations, we'd point to less mentally emphasized cultures that lack laws. The mythical affinity still evident in modern China, for example, recognizes law at best in the limited Confucian patriarchal form of regulations. For the rest, precept and taboo prevail, but they are not laws. Their place is filled by custom, as given in the Old Book of Wisdom, our knowledge of which we owe to Richard Wilhelm. The basic distinction between a law and a custom has been noted by a distinguished observer of China. Quote, those men to whom a generous destiny has entrusted with the task of establishing a constitution for the societies to which they belong had the duty of finding norms for a communal life. In Europe, the choice in such cases was almost always made of promulgating laws whose validity depended upon the power of the state which was able to enforce such laws. So there's like the common Western approach to laws. The Chinese chose another way. They created customs for common life. The difference between a custom and a law lies in the recognition that the validity of a custom is found in a deeper or earlier level of the human soul. So that to us signals that if laws and rights and all that are a product of the mental structure, well then customs, as we're about to learn what they are, that belongs to a deeper region of the soul, which is to say a deeper consciousness structure of the magical and mythical structures. Its acceptance or standing resides at the pre- or subconscious level, whereas laws are obeyed or disobeyed consciously. Now, I do not wish to maintain that there are no laws in China or no customs in Europe, yet we Europeans surely base our common life primarily on its rights and laws, while the Chinese, by contrast, base theirs on custom. Customs, however, must not be confused with morals, since, quote, morality is always a conscious idea. We're doing Gebser now. But custom is undoubtedly akin to what we Europeans call tact. The word tact clearly indicates an affinity to the heart, the organ of the mythical consciousness. foundation of tact is the heart, just as customs are appropriate mainly to the mythical consciousness. Even today, to be tactful means to act according to custom, that is, well-mannered. Understood in this way, understood in this way, tact is a fulfillment of a law which is not stipulated mentally. Where tact prevails, no law is needed. So essentially, the laws of the mythical magic structure, should they be followed, preclude the need for mental laws at all. Now, of course, realistically, we know that's never going to happen. Ideally, you would want to have both. But ideally, we wouldn't need laws at all. We would all be following tact, all be following custom, we'd all be unified, and everything would be great. But also, realistically, that's just not the world we live in. Since jurisprudence and law, or rights, are manifestations of the mind or mental structure, as well as being the sociological safeguards par excellence, it is understandable that they are always invested with conservative and traditionalistic properties. All fixed positings are static and thus spatial and expressly mental. And another point to kind of, again, you guys did a good job, I think, with maybe deconstructing the international application of this. But I do think of the American right in politics. For better or worse, they are set. They are static. They are ordered. This is what they do. Now, you could say they have bad systems and they're statically set to these systems. Fine. That's you're more than entitled to that opinion. Nonetheless, I do think there is a reason I associate the rational right with the political right, and it's more to do with just the terminological similarity. The right is more rational, again, for better or worse. So the good aspect of that is you get all the benefits of efficient rationality. The bad benefits of that is you get all the deficient aspects of deficient rationalism, and you preclude all the benefits of the other structures. So don't think that I'm saying that I'm necessarily giving the right a pass on this. No. If this is kill rationalism, I mean, a lot of the rationalists, truly rationalists, are on the right. So in many ways, we're killing the contemporary right wing. It's just another thing to consider. The left always brags about how open they are, and frankly, I'm not even sure they're wrong to do that. But if you're open, then that signals that you're not statically set. If you're not statically set, then you're not being rational or rationalist. Again, there is a efficient and deficient aspect of this. But nonetheless, I do think it holds in America. For our investigation, the decisive question is whether there is a basic change in jurisprudence. If there is actually emerging today a form of realization which is no longer prospectively fixed, then despite its conservative character, this fundamentally important field must furnish indications of decisive and transforming events or eruption in its foundations, its organization, and its operations. So what we're going to be doing for the rest of this video is watching how the genius that is Jean Gebser presciently predicts the rise of social justice. It's actually pretty incredible the way he does it, and he explains the consciousness foundations of it. It's pretty amazing, I think. This is in fact the case. Jurisprudence is in the process of establishing new foundations. This is less evident with respect to the philosophy or the history of law than with respect to the concrete evidence of recent practice in legislation and legal decisions. Okay. The evidence indicative of change in jurisprudence, as well as of aperspectival beginnings, may be summarized under three headings. Number 1, the consideration of time. Stop me if you've heard this before. Number 2, the supersession of dualism. Number 3, a tendency toward a rationality. Gotta fix my hair here. So we'll start with number 1. We will limit ourselves to the most recent research and will forego a discussion of Montesquieu's unique work, the Cahiers, C-A-H-I-E-R-S, in which he has strikingly anticipated the new attitude towards jurisprudence, only now coming to realization. Montesquieu's grand maxim is an imposing expression and guiding light. Quote, "If I knew of something useful to me and injurious to my family, I would banish it from my mind. If I knew of something useful to my family, but not to my country, I would seek to forget it. If I knew something useful to my country and harmful for Europe, or useful to Europe and harmful for humanity, I would regard it as a crime." So why is this sort of the maxim that expresses this new sort of social justice? Because what's happening is we're rejecting the individualist framework. So if it's useful to me and injurious to my family, what's happening here? The irrational energies, our moral energies, are being cast outward rather than inward into the individual or into our little individual enclave, which is to say our family, friends. That's the only thing that matters. No, it's being shoved outwards. There's a broader collective that needs to be tended to morally. Now, There's actually a meme. I've actually written an article about this. It's called "Why Does Everyone Care About the Global Community All of a Sudden?" There's a meme about this where you see a lot of right-wingers posting a lot, where there's this heat map or heat chart where it shows where the moral loyalties lie between the left and the right. And if you see it on the right, it's concentrated in the individual sphere. So you have you, obviously, you have your friends, you have your family, you have your country, and that's about it with the right. And even then, the country gets a little abstract. They're always going to privilege their friends and family over these sort of abstract globalist ideals that the left does. But if you see the left, their heat map is the complete opposite. It's outer, it's outwards, it's away from the individual. So they care more about, Africans that they've never met, or immigrants who are immigrating to America or Europe that they've never really met before, than they do their fellow neighborhood. I mean, they'll call their fellow neighbors racist, white, evil bigots who are products of a systemically privileged yada, yada, yada. I mean, it's kind of insane. Both sides are kind of making a mistake here. The right is obvious. Yes, I understand. There is a difference between caring for your mother and caring for a random Haitian dude who you've never met and who doesn't share anything with you culturally. Fine, I understand that. That doesn't mean you have to necessarily treat that Haitian guy as just an object or a chess piece to move around so you can get what you want. He's still a human being. I understand there's extreme differences. I'm not saying deny that. I'm not saying invite him into your home and let him, live with you or anything like that. But you don't have to be cruel at the same time, right? You can show respect and love for other people beyond just your immediate community. And the left, man, the problem with what the left is, both of these sides are doing something in spite of the other. So the right is spiting the sort of the other, if you will, in favor of their community and their loved ones, respectable to an extent. And then the left is doing the same thing, but the opposite, right? They're spiting their neighbors, their loved ones, their family, and they care more about these random Mexican dudes or these random Brazilians or whoever than they do their, their fellow countrymen. It's insane. You can like both. You can appreciate both. It's paradoxically, yes, obviously, there's a huge difference between someone like me and someone like a Haitian guy in terms of culture, cultural practices, cultural facets, whatever you want to call it. And yet, simultaneously, we are united in the commonality of manhood. This is like Dostoevsky, right? You killed that, I can't remember her name, the clerk, Raskolnikov kills the clerk who is just a bitch and just a bad person. And so you think, okay, well, what's the problem here? You killed someone bad. No, you killed a member of man. That's the problem. You killed a fellow man, human. Think Martin Luther King, right? Now, no one's saying you have to throw out reason and rationality entirely. You still be intelligent. But you can like all, even if admitting that not everything has to be equal. Okay. So number one, the consideration of time has been expressed in jurisprudence in a variety of ways since the French Revolution. The law enforced until then was quote-unquote static law. In the center, we're going to get into some base stuff here. I can't lie. This section, I knew it was coming. This made me very, very nervous when I was reading because he was giving me so much great stuff. And I don't know what I was thinking. I was worried he was going to try to overthrow like capitalism or liberalism. I don't know what I was thinking, but he's incredibly base. And the center of his still predominantly Roman juridical system was the quote-unquote fundamental inviolability of private property, which on the other hand despised labor and thus legislated only peripherally, unquote. The famous statement, whoever uses his right injures no one, is an expression of this rigid, absolute attitude. So, of course, the whole point of rights, and you will see the American right, including me, by the way, to a large extent, we'll harp on this, right? The whole point of the right is that they're static, they're set. I don't care if you're offended by someone being mean to you verbally. I don't care. It's not that it's not necessarily important. It's just when compared to the importance and necessity of the First Amendment, it's so, diminishing. Imagine destroying the First Amendment, throwing people in jail for the wrong political speech, creating that situation, and then they get in power, and then they throw you in jail for the exact same thing, just going the other way, and then you sit there in your cell and you go, well, maybe we shouldn't have gotten rid of the First Amendment because my liberal friend decided he wanted to run to a safe space. You know what I mean? Like, that's the whole point. Their whole point is they're supposed to be static and set, even if that static nature breeds about negative short-term results, right? So take the First Amendment, for example. Yeah, so if I have the right, I might use that right to be a complete piece of crap. I might use racial epithets. I might just be a dick. You know what I mean? Unfortunately, the positives outweigh the negatives. I don't know what to say. Let's see. Because of the emphasis on the absoluteness of subjective legality, possession, and property, law was spatially fixed and hence totally mental. The temporal factor, or the factor of change and differentiated relationships, were hardly considered. By contrast, contemporary legislation demands an increasing attention to juridical effects and allows, for example, the application of the clausula rebus sic stantibus, which permits a subsequent change of fixed contracts, recognizing changed circumstances. This is tantamount to recognition of the temporal factor, and today's increasing practice of shortening statutes of limitations expresses a dissolution of the previous fixity and stability of law. Beautiful. So we're seeing how time is loosening up, if you will, the perspectival rigidity or fixity or static nature of the law. So time is that a mention that integrates. In this case, if the laws are changing dependent upon changed circumstances, well, those changed circumstances presupposes a temporal element here, a temporal setting here. You start one way, emphasis on the temporal, change, and then change again, and then end this way. Okay, well, clearly, first this, then that, then this, then that. Now, he didn't use this example, but think about, like, let's say I'm an NFL player. You know, I get 5 women pregnant, 9 women pregnant, like some of these guys are so stupid. And then I got to pay all this child support, right? Well, of course, now that I retired or now that I'm injured, I don't have the same money coming in, so I can't afford to pay all this stuff. I might go to the judge and say, listen, I was making $2 million a year for 8 years, and that was great. I'm broke. My circumstances have changed. I make $2,000 a month now doing car wash ads. That's it. That's all I do. So the judge may say, circumstances have changed. I'm going to lower this child support you have to pay. That's an example. So the perspectival fixity is being loosened. Oh, listen to this. Listen to this. While former laws were mainly individualistic, the emerging new ones are primarily social. Beautiful. Beautiful. Does that not sound exactly like social justice? The former laws, the individual rights, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, all the way down of the amendments, those are individualistic white supremacist nonsense. Now we need laws that are going to help the collective in a qualitative sense. So rights, let's talk about this for a second. Rights are vanishing points. They are a political version of a vanishing point. And of course, if you don't follow my Kill Rationalism series or you forgot this, a vanishing point is an invisible and inferred point that confers clarity, order, and depth and structures what follows from it. So think of it obviously in art and perspectivity. You have the point on the vanishing line where all the lines in the frame converge. That point, through opening and closing, allows structure and order and depth to be realized visually. Great. Same thing with laws, right? So laws, in a sense, they close because I'm not allowed to murder you. I'm not allowed to assault you. I'm not allowed to steal from you, okay? But they also open in the sense that, okay, I'm allowed to actually participate in society because you're not allowed to murder me and assault me and steal from me, right? So there's an opening and a closing aspects. And, of course, laws structure our political organization. There's no getting around that, obviously. They offer order, clarity, and depth and structure to our political organization. They are a vanishing point, offering even more evidence that the law is a mental structure phenomenon. Great. So rights are designed to confer protections on the individual when it comes to static phenomena like possession and property, whereas new jurisprudence is designed to confer qualitative benefits on the quality of the collective rather than the static protections of the individual. At the end of the paragraph, I'm going to explain why this is a problem. The basic concern is no longer the guarantee of property, but the security of work. While possessions and property are static and spatially fixed, work and accomplishment are temporal and quote-unquote dynamic. Duguit, and his school have founded an admittedly one-sided dynamic law and stress exclusively the quote-unquote judicial function, even at the expense of the individual, considering only the effectiveness of justice in and for society. It is becoming increasingly evident that justice in the old mental sense is suffering losses which are not so much aimed at eliminating law as such, but rather at impairing its exclusive validity, as befits the mutation of consciousness. The left element, the transfiguring factor of law since the French Revolution, introduced the left, the non-rights, into law. Ultimately, this results in a materialistic and decadent notion that, quote, right is what is useful, unquote. So what the hell does that mean? So we have that, right? I just explained. So the right wing is big on rights, and they're big on the static protections conferred by rights. Great. So the left has picked up on this social justice stuff, obviously, and this social justice stuff is an attempt, as I just laid out, to transcend, well, ideally, it's an attempt to complement the individual protections of rights and all that stuff with the qualitative improvements of the collective. Great. You know, we could see the complementary whole there. Unfortunately, because this is all happening unconsciously, what has happened is the left has used rights, traditional rights, to achieve their collective qualitative goals, but because they don't understand what traditional rights are, remember these static protections upon static phenomena for the individual, those rights were never going to accomplish that in the first place. I don't know if people don't understand this. Simply declaring a right to food does not make food appear magically out of the ground. Food has to be created. There's human toil and energy that has to be expended in the creation of food. And for the vast majority of history, it came at an extremely high cost, whether of slavery, serfdom, or just death. So simply declaring something a right does not make it magically so. So if you say, I have a right to not be offended, sorry, buddy, that's not going to make it magically so. You have no to be offended or to not be offended, these are dynamic, fluid processes. These are not individual, static phenomena that rights can protect and confer upon the individual. That's not how it works. So when you say, I have the right to food, I have the right to affordable housing, I have the right to not be offended, I have the right to a clean car, I have a right to clean air, I have a right to whatever, really. I have a right to, I mean, it really is kind of sad, right? I mean, you can see what's happening, right? So we have the traditional rational rights, but now we have this new incipient desire to increase the quality of the collective, of the social body. Great. Instead of just finding ways to do this in a way that complements our traditional laws and rights and all that stuff, those laws and rights, by the way, that millions of immigrants have risked their lives and their little girls' and little boys' lives in a very real way, not abstract, not in a video game where you get to do it, very real. And they come over here for those rights and laws. So it's probably not a wise idea to just toss them outside willy-nilly like that, but okay. So what does the left do? They take rights, which were an effective political element, tool, whatever you want to call it, and they go, if I just streamline my desire for qualitative improvements of the social body or collective through quantitative protections conferred upon the individual rights, everything will be fine. I'll just get it. This is why you get jurisprudence. This is why you get this ridiculous DEI nonsense. This is why you get equity, this sort of, hey, you have a right, to make up a certain proportion of the workforce here, or you have a right to make up a certain proportion of the student body here. It's just insane. It's absurd. And of course, it's all a fail. So we get the worst of both worlds. So you've destroyed individual rights and the traditional bedrock foundations that our country sort of rested on, which again, millions and millions and millions have died or risked dying to come over here, and they will do it again. And you don't even get the improvements to the social body you wanted, because the traditional static rights were never going to confer those improvements in the first place. Like I said with the food, simply declaring it a right doesn't make it a right. No matter what Bernie Sanders does, I don't know what to tell you. It's no different than a right-winger saying it's not going to storm tomorrow because Jesus Christ said so. I mean, what are we doing? So this is why Gebser says a right is whatever is useful. So this is why human rights is another great example. What is a human right? The same people who don't even believe in constitutional rights believe in human rights. What is a human right? I think everything's a human right. I think Margot Robbie feeding me grapes every night as I play FIFA and get drunk all night. I think that's a human right. I think having 1,000 Lamborghinis is a human right. That's what I think is a human right. Why can't you give me that? It's all so silly. Please understand what rights are. Understand what the social justice movement is getting at, and you will understand this broadly. So if you are on the left and you watch this, what your job is to do, stop trying to streamline your 4D integral desires through the 3D rational rights and just find other ways to complement it. Don't try to undermine the rights, complement the rights, okay? It's very simple. The eruption of time and law has upset mental man's base, revealing its inadequacy. The recognition of work as a value, required and achieved by the awakened left, true. When you are working, you're not just mindlessly expending energy. There are certain qualities, right? When I'm working at NASA, I'm revealing the qualities of precision, of extreme care, of focus, right? These are qualities. It's not just, do the little factory thing and just kind of moving through. We're all just chess pieces, objects. No, the left helps us with this. We are not just objects. Is a recognition of time insofar as activity is a temporal value realizable in time and temporal process. The overthrow of the king, the rex as the right, by the power suppressed through the centuries, parallels the shift of emphasis from property to work. So remember, property, static, still, phenomena. There you go. Work is the expansion of energy and the revelation of qualities. This is temporal. When I'm working, there's a temporal process unfolding. I'm taking the widgets out from the machine, putting it onto the line, putting it into the box. This is happening in time. It's not static. It's not set. This process shows the exhaustion of the mental structure. If work is time, then the process of socialization, becoming more evident since the turn of the century, is an exact parallel to the revolutionary recognition of time in physics as well as in natural sciences. In both cases, there is a danger that the time might be judged as a numerical quantity rather than as a qualitative element. The physical geometrical time and the calculation of labor are de-evaluations of genuine primordial time, the achronon. The alter effects of deficient mental, that is, rational quantitative thought, still threaten the consolidation of the new integral consciousness structure. The great aftershocks have not yet passed. The effort to abolish the entire mental structure is not yet recognized as a major error, and the irrational component has in the main not yet been mastered. So what he's saying is, so long as time in relation to work is viewed as nothing more than hours spent, hours expended in terms of calculating pay, we're going to have a problem here. And that's why we get workers' unions. The left helps with this. The left understood that no, actually, we are human beings. I just did a video about this, actually, called How Time Affects the Political Landscape, which I think you should watch, by the way. I think that was a good video. I try not to be super hard on the partisan stuff. I think there were some good insights in there. But time as a quality is what brought us workers' union, right? So the left is saying, look, no, actually, we're not just empty chess pieces. We're not just these empty objects. We're not going to treat 6-year-old, 7-year-old, 8-year-old, 10-year-old children and throw them into the mines so where they can get soot and black tar in their lung or whatever the hell, coal in their lungs. And we are going to have a little bit of respect for the quality of experience during working, because these are humans after all. And I don't give a shit about grounding my desire to humanize and improve the human race in a rational, no, it comes from the soul, it comes from the heart. This is where the left shines. They humanize, maybe too far, but that same criticism goes to the right too. They dehumanize. That can be a good thing, because there are times in life where you have to make difficult decisions. You have to give tough love. You have to make trade-offs. I don't know what to say. Nonetheless, you can see the problem with both. So workers' unions saying, no, actually, I am going to integrate time as a quality when in relation to time spent working. That's how we get workers' unions. We get protections and measurements to protect the quality of experience in time working. That's another thing. Did I say? That's right. There's the left element. Actually, I already did kind of cover that. Pretty much a left element is any non-right that is called a right anyways. So social justice, DEI, all that stuff. I guess I already covered that. Okay, so the influence of the left element is well described by W.F. Burgee. Quote, today the right to private property is increasingly questioned from outside by the communistic demands for expropriation and undermined from inside by the growing demands of the new legislative limitations and taxes favoring the interests of the community. Who does that sound like? Sounds like Bernie Sanders. Sounds like that idiot Hassan. Guys, please read basic economics. I am begging you. You can do these. You can actually make improvements in the world that work with our limiting principles. A regression back into deficient collectivism and communism, and all, it's just such a waste. I can't believe it even needs to be said. God. Explicitly opposed to the various threats to ownership, own as in my own is always ego-bound, is the immense development of legal areas concerned with the requirement of work and the protection of the employee. Modern legislation not only protects the personal interests of the employee, but deliberately advances employment as such, since its significance for the state and the economy is fully recognized. He continues. I'm going to make a point real quick. The problem with workers' protections and measurements or measures to protect workers and all these workers' union stuff and all these guaranteed your boss has to pay your insurance and all this stuff, the problem with this should be obvious, right? An employer is limited in what he can pay you based on your productivity, my friend. So if you produce at $35,000 an hour or at $35,000 a year, let's say, I can't pay you that. I can't pay you that if I have $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 that I have to pay out of my pocket to protect you in terms of paying for your medical insurance, paying for this, paying for that, paying for this, paying for that. So the problem is, I'm just not going to hire you. I have to hire someone who's producing $55,000, $60,000, $65,000 a year. So every time you see one of these laws that says employers have to pay workers for time off maybe in labor or health insurance or something like that, it sounds good, and intuitively you think, oh, that's a good thing because people are getting helped. Problem is, it makes people less likely to be hired at all. And if you're less likely to be hired at all, not only are you not getting any of that paid for, you're not getting any income at all. So now you've just destroyed the poorest of the poor, because the poorest of the poor, one, either maybe through life circumstances not there, they don't have the opportunities to produce at that hour. Two, maybe they're just bad people and they are poor for the reason that they don't respect the society they live in. They don't acclimate themselves to the rules of it. Or three, they're poor on paper, which means they're 15 and they work at Safeway like I did, and I made $10 a year, and that makes me poor on paper, but I only made that much because I hadn't worked before and I hadn't accumulated the human capital, the knowledge, interest, skills, experience to earn more, right? So you're pricing people out of a job. So just be careful next time you advocate for stuff like that. For these reasons, labor and its representatives enjoy today an almost unlimited prestige and utter contradistinction to the conceptions of not only ancient Rome, but of pre-revolutionary Europe. Whereas work was then considered to be almost dishonorable, the conviction became ever more widespread during the last century that only those whose activity is useful to the community have a justifiable existence. So, think serfs, right? Or Thomas Sowell talked about this. He talked about why some cultures way back in the day, they genuinely viewed work to be like beneath them and to be beneath like God's way and God's teaching. So they just didn't make any, they just didn't create any wealth because that wasn't their thing. You have that sometimes. You have people and cultures that just, for whatever reason, rightly or wrongly, they just don't value work. And it's not a surprise that they don't create as much wealth as we do. Today, property is put on the defensive almost, Today, property is put on the defensive almost everywhere and endures the socio-political attacks and growing impositions by the state with difficulty and in a materially weakened form. Labor, on the other hand, enjoys maximal recognition, and its security has become the central task of modern legislation. Now, we obviously see this, and just the general anti-corporate, anti-capitalist narrative that so permeates our culture. Remember when Luigi Mangione killed that completely innocent guy? A bunch of people celebrated who didn't even know how the insurance company worked. They didn't even know that. Don't get me started, dude. God. The point is, when he killed that guy, everyone was celebrating as if he did something right. At best, this signals a profound ignorance of how things work. At worst, it signals an evil soul. I would choose both, frankly. The weight of evidence from these remarks documenting the shift of emphasis, this is Gebser now, From property to labor, and several important new laws have never been more marshaled with such clarity. We will necessarily have to restrict ourselves to a few examples. Crucial erosions of rights of ownership can be seen in price ceilings and limitations of commerce, while the new land rights and agrarian reform, at the immediate expense of private property, revised social rights, clearing rights, cartel legislation, insurance, new stockholders' rights, all serve to protect the rights of labor. So all these property elements, these left elements designed to help the labor and to harm, it seems, I guess the employer. There you go. Social rights, clearing rights, cartel rights, price controls, price ceilings, price whatever, price floors. I mean, so much of this is just like common sense economic stuff. I cannot believe. Do I even need to explain why this stuff is bad? Maybe I'll do another video. I just cannot... Listen, good economics come about, they merge, or they emerge when there's an alignment between supplier and demander, when there is a mutual respect shown between consumer and seller. To attack so openly the suppliers and to ignore the most basic of economical laws, it's just... Whatever. I guess whatever. It is what it is. The change of emphasis from property to labor is clearly indicated by the frequent allusions to the managerial revolution among business leaders and directors in the American and European economies. Judicially, this new managerial class demonstrates that the power of the highest employee is increasingly prevailing at the expense of the boards of directors who represent property interests. Isn't it amazing how in one paragraph Gebser can just like completely render transparent these kind of important aspects that are almost underrated, like this new managerial revolution? This is a very important theory to the modern contemporary right. They believe that there's been almost like a managerial divide where you have managers and bureaucrats, and I believe this to a large extent, maybe not quite to the level they do, and then you have the sort of the plebs, right? And the managers are always trying to take power, money, interest, resources, and move it from the plebs and into their hands because they've decided that they're morally and intellectual superior and they can just plan everyone's life. You see this. It is a real thing. Okay, let's keep going. The dissolution of former rights, the reduction of individuals' preeminence because of restrictions are manifest in the ever more prevalent manner in which new legislation is formulated. Skeleton descriptions and broad provisions replace particular provisions and precisely formulated rights. The rigid perspectival fixity and the strict directives give way to a more flexible attitude permitting the judge a latitude of free interpretation in accordance with the temporally changing requirements. Hello, Obama, Mr. You have to pass the bill to find out what is in the bill. No longer in the mental, traditional, rational way of doing things are we being hyper-pedantic about the meaning of particular words, which I guess is necessary if you're going to be in the law. That's gone. Now we have omnibus, where it's just 1 trillion pages. No one even knows what's in it. No one has time to read all this stuff. And you just pass stuff. It's great. And both sides do this now. I think Obama really ramped it up, unfortunately. But yeah, both sides do this. This is terrible, by the way. We just have it's just a free-for-all. Anything goes, so that's great. What was I about to say? And we can see here, right? So we can see how time is loosening up, again, that perspectival fixity. That is the key, I guess, element that you're seeing in all these these set static systems are being loosened up. And in this case, it's because of changing circumstances, free interpretation, all these temporal and qualitative elements in the section of jurisprudence. Okay. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. This example demonstrates that a recovery in the form of a strengthening of the aperspectival bearing may emerge when work is valued as a quality and no longer mistakenly valued as a quantitative expenditure of time and material utility. As long as time in the form of work is dealt with quantitatively by sociology and jurisprudence, there is a danger of sociological and jurisprudential atomization. This is an exact parallel of the erroneous manipulation of time as a geometric physical quantity of mass in physics, which also subjects it to the danger of atomization. It parallels, in addition, the frequently mistaken treatment of the unconscious by depth psychology, where the overextended amplification of the psychic temporal element holds the threat of inflating and indeed atomizing the soul. So what he's saying is, it's good to release yourselves from the fixity of 3D mental stuff. Great. But incorporating time, you have to incorporate time at its full complexity. time freedom. You can't just do the mental time, because if you do the mental time, you get the same problem. Remember what happened in Einstein. This continued pushing and dividing, it threatens to break apart the entire world and split the atom and ruin everything. Same thing here. The more we treat time as quantitative, well, we're going to atomize the human being and turn everything into little red pill productivity gains. Let's see. In this connection, Burgi observes that, quote, precisely the deepened knowledge of our times concerning the relativity of each phenomenon is most likely the reason for the intensified appeal for dynamic or functional rights during recent decades for a justice that responds to the constant change of life's processes and thus attempts to integrate the element of time or the law of continuous transformation into the judicial order. I mean, what more plain, how much more plainly do you need that time is being integrated and is changing things? No pun intended there. Since the relaxation of rigid rules tends to respect individual differences, it institutes increased potency of the qualitative aspects. Modern laws such as ours have to a great extent met many needs by incorporating delimited frameworks and broad provisions without, of course, questioning the static principle of a given judicial order. So that's really what we're doing here in jurisprudence, just like everything else. By incorporating time, by incorporating the qualitative elements, in addition to our static quantitative elements, we are sort of transcending into a more holistic perception. Were we again permitted a parallelism? Hold on. Yeah, screw it. Were we again permitted a parallelism, we could say that the delimited frameworks and broad provisions in the area of jurisprudence are similar to the energy quantum and the indeterminacy principle resulting from it in physics. It is common to both that they explode the spatially, causally, and perspectively fixed, rigidified conceptual systems and open up an arena for freedom. Both are pervaded by valuations leading to the questions of intensity and quality of events. Such a comparison, if permissible, is most instructive, although it can be achieved only systatically and not systematically. The same primordiality manifests in the quantum of action appears in principle in the employment of indeterminate broad provisions. Thus, jurisprudence becomes something other than a mere law. It becomes volition and the perception and imparting of truth. Okay, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. So now we have the supersession of dualism, point number 2, in jurisprudence. Is actually, he spends maybe this is a criticism, he spends a shockingly short amount of time on these last 2 points, so we're almost done. It is recognizable in 2 salient facts. The one, pointed out by W.F. Burgi, shows that subjective laws have lost their absolute character, yet the loss of absoluteness is equivalent to the abandonment of dualism, since it is conceivable only on the basis of absolute principles. Objective, subjective. These are absolute. Once this absoluteness goes, subjective and objective are gone, right? And you can kind of see this too, because the law, which is both static and perspectively rigid and fixed, is also open and dynamic in the things we've talked about so far. Open to interpretation, changing depending on circumstances, so it's both static and open simultaneously. This is symptomatically expressed when we are dealing with the problem of labor, as in the right to work and related rights to security. Thus, the old subject-object antithesis has to a great extent been rendered obsolete in the conduct of law. It is most significant that man today more than ever begins to speak not merely of law, but also of justice and fairness, as well as rights and responsibilities. This too expresses the inceptual supersession of rational thinking and alternatives that admits only the opposites of justice and injustice, evident also in the legal adjustment for damages in accord with the actual indebtedness. Now, of course, emphasis on justice and social justice. Justice, you're constantly hearing about justice nowadays, whether it's social justice, whether it's a theory of justice by Rawls, which is stupid, by the way. I don't take anyone seriously who actually follows that as an ethical system. That is ridiculous nonsense. Absolute ridiculous nonsense. Absolute ridiculous nonsense. Don't like Rawls. He's a moron. Adolf Arndt has clearly demonstrated the untenability of the dualistic, quote, division of just and unjust, public, objective, and subjective rights. He emphatically states that, quote, the dualistic structure of analytic and causal thinking, extending from antiquity to the modern epoch of a rational world, operates axiomatically with the alternatives of either or. Has not the time come for overcoming this fragmented thinking? Very interesting that he mentions time in here. Has not the time come for overcoming this fragmented thinking? I mean, talk about a perfect expression expression of integral consciousness there. Not only are we overcoming the either or irrational thinking, but we feel a sort of sense of time here. Oh, interesting. Let's see. And actually, that's probably where we're going to stop on this point, actually. Once you drop the absoluteness of the subjectivity of law, well, all your dualisms start to bounce. Kind of like inorganic and organic in biology. It's both, right? They're both kind of there. All right, number 3, the tendency toward irrationality in the new jurisprudence. Here it should be noted that irrationality does not imply a total exclusion of causality. With respect to causally found rationality, irrationality is overdetermined by the possibility and recognition of indeterminate and open elements. This is well expressed in modern definition of laws, which are quite frequently approximate and exemplified by a singular case. That is, they are exemplary rather than directed, fixed, and absolutely binding, and are consciously left non-definitive. So that's an expression of an irrational kind of manifestation or element. It's no longer, rather than having direction, there's just one, right? There's no real direction. And it completely eschews the traditional mental stuff. Now it's sort of a open, this is the case and do with it what you will kind of thing. That's completely divorced from the traditional way of doing laws and all that stuff. The same basic tendency is evident in contemporary legal suits where quite frequently the judge's verdict corresponds to the expressed desires and goals agreed upon by both parties. Another example. Thus the law is applied only as an external formality, or where the so-called economic and functional interpretation has taken on increasing significance, or in other cases where the judgment is reached on the basis of individual and super-individual interests. This is an open justice. So I guess the open, ideally, would be the judge has the freedom now to say, look, I can follow the law, and it does have its own validity, but at the same time, by incorporating time as equality, time as just the element that changes things, maybe I could also use my own, we can work with whatever the parties agree on. Ideally, that could be fine, but how it's practiced is a separate question. In other words, jurisprudence gives evidence of the same process of liberation from compulsive systemization and spatially bound conceptual incarceration that philosophy has set out to do. I mean, I'm going to repeat it again because it really does express what's happening with all of the sections we've covered so far, and we will cover. Jurisprudence, or philosophy, psychology, whatever, gives evidence of the same process of liberation from compulsive systemization and spatially bound conceptual incarceration that philosophy has set out to do. The dissociation from an exclusive rationality is occurring without losing control or reality. This dissociation from an exclusive rationality is occurring without losing control of reality or reverting to irrationality by our mastery of both modes of realization. How delusional. How naive, Gebser. I love you to death, but you are naive, my friend. He assumes too much good faith, and you saw him do it with the postmodernists in the philosophy section. No, we have totally lost touch with reality. We have completely lost touch with reality. We have not mastered our rational faculties. We have not mastered our irrational faculties, and everything's going to shit. So no, you were delusional. You were naive. We didn't lose control of reality. Get out of here, dude. God. Let's see. This law is overdetermined to the same extent as philosophy. Both overdeterminations are possible because of the incorporation of what we call systasis. Just as philosophy is no longer philosophy in a mental sense, but is becoming a theology, mentally conceived justice and its new overdetermined form is becoming what we have tentatively called volition or a-waring. As custom became law and mythology became philosophy, law, in the mutation occurring today, is becoming an expression of volition, and the philosophy is becoming an etiology or veracity. To the same degree that open thinking in the new philosophy contains characteristics of aperspectivity, open justice, at least potentially expresses the same characteristics. It should be emphasized that the equation of open thinking with open justice does not rest on the fortuitous coincidence of terms. In both cases, this openness relates to the same process of desystemization and deperspectivization of thinking, as well as of justice, by the inclusion of the time element. So once again, temporic efficacy makes the decisive transit possible. Excellent. Next week, we will be doing sociology and economics. So that will be fun. And hope you guys enjoyed something. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Did you guys learn anything? Do you guys think this is cool? Do you think it's cool that Gebser kind of predicted the rise of social justice? I personally do think it's cool. Let me know what you guys think, and I will see you guys next week. I love you guys. Thank you guys.